Neon lights are cool, but you know what's even cooler? A portrait made up of neon lights. Join me if you fancy learning how to create this artwork in Photoshop using the pen tool, some layer effects, and some smart techniques to keep everything non-destructive. First thing you will need to do is to find a good photo of a person that you can use as your reference, that you can trace over. And I normally choose images from Unsplash. And for the image I use for this tutorial, you can find a link in the description below. And now I can't guarantee that this is going to be available at the time you're watching the video, but you can always look for similar photos. So once you have that ready, you can start tracing with the pen tool. So you have to press P on the keyboard to select the tool, and then make sure you set it to shape mode, so not path mode. Select shape, and then the following settings I recommend. Set the fill color to none, the stroke to white, or whatever color is going to look good on the image. So while you are tracing, you have to make sure you can see these lines. I'm going to use white in this case. And then the thickness you can decide on, whatever works with the size. It really depends on the resolution and the image size, but I'm going to use this size. By the way, if you want to increase it quickly, you can click and drag on the word stroke, and that makes it increasing and decreasing quickly. Also, additionally, options that you might want to change is the alignment for the stroke, and that I normally set to center align, which is the second icon from here. The caps you can already set up to be round. And also the corners you can set to round. So that's pretty much all you have to do. And if you want, you can also save this as a preset. So if you're planning to do more of these portraits, you can just go to the pen tool and then select the plus icon here and just type in tracing. And you can also include the color. That way you can easily come back to it next time. So if you have different settings, clicking on this preset will bring back all the options for you. So you don't even have to create a separate layer because the pen tool will automatically create shape layers each time you are drawing with it. I'm just going to zoom a little bit closer and show you what I mean. So all you have to do is to click to start drawing a line. And then if you just simply click, that draws straight lines. Or if you click and drag, you can create curved lines. So once again, I click and drag, create a curved line. And if you are drawing something and you feel like it goes too far from the position that you wanted, you don't have to undo, just hold down the space bar and reposition the point that you are currently creating. When you let go of the space, you can still adjust the handles so you can create the curve the way you need it. If you hold down Command or Control while drawing with the pen tool, you can also go back and adjust previous anchor points, which is very handy. So as you can see, I can adjust both the handles and anchors. And then when I click on the last point, I can continue drawing the line. Another useful shortcut is holding down the Alt or Option key, with which you can turn a corner point, so a sharp point, into a smooth point, which has handles. And again, if you hold down the Alt or Option key and click on an already existing smooth point, you can convert it back into a sharp corner. So if I do that on these, you can see they turn into corner points. So it removes the handles effectively. To start a new line, all you have to do is to hold down Command or Control key, click somewhere outside, and then start drawing again. So that creates an additional shape layer. Here on the right side, you can see that now I have two shape layers. And you won't need to combine these together. It's better to keep them separate, and because that makes it easier to make amends to them. If you want to make changes to multiple shape layers, just use the black arrow, the path selection tool. A is the shortcut for it, with which you can very quickly select multiple paths as long as the select option is set to all layers. That way you can very quickly increase, decrease the size of all of them at the same time. Now there's one additional feature for the pen tool that might be useful if you are new to using it, and that is the rubber band. You can find this here under the settings. If you turn on rubber band, you can then start drawing in a slightly different way. So if I click and move my cursor, notice how it's already showing the next segment. So now I can click and drag to create this curve here. And then once again, when I move my cursor without clicking or doing anything, it's already showing me the next segment. So that might help to identify whether you placed your previous anchor in the right place or not. It's also worth mentioning that if the lines are not that visible on the background, you can change the color here again in the settings. So if I switch, I don't know, maybe to yellow, it might show better on the image. So it really depends on what background you're working on, but I'm just going to go back to the default settings. Also, if you want, you can increase the thickness of these lines. Once again, that might help you to see better what you're doing. Now I'm going to fast forward this process because it's not that exciting to watch me doing the same thing all over again. Whenever you use a photo reference, try to simplify it as much as you can, so the least amount of lines and details you can use, the better normally. What I'm going to also pay attention to is to keep some of the lines thicker than the other ones. So there will be some supporting detail lines that are not as important as the main silhouette and details. But now it's time to hide the photo and put a color fill layer at the bottom so we can concentrate better on the illustration itself. So I normally would go to the solid color adjustment, select that, and then pick whatever color works, but this will work for us. I'm going to click OK, and I don't even have to hide the photo because this is already covering it. What's more important is that we need to group all of our shape layers. So I am going to select all of them, I think all the way up to the top. Yep, so up to here, I'm going to select all and then Command or Control G to group it. So this is the group that has all the layers necessary for the face. And then the remaining layers I'm going to group separately, which is going to be the shades. So I'm going to rename these groups, shades and face. And I can also give them colors just to make it easier to find them later on. I'm going to mark the face blue and then the shades violet. So let's check this again, shades and face. Now that we have all of these ready, it's time to add the neon effect, and that's by using layer styles. It's a fairly simple method because all you have to do is to add these on the groups. Let's start with the face. I'm going to double click on the layer group and then layer style panel comes up, within which I'm going to first add the outer glow option. Now you can see that I already have these settings saved. I prefer to use the settings that you can see here, but of course you can always adjust the color easily. And for the face, I'm going to use something like this. So a bright cyan or blue color. And of course we can always increase the opacity, but I prefer to use a bit less, something like that. And you can just copy the settings I use here, but of course you can experiment with other settings as well. But this is not enough on its own. I like to also add two drop shadow effects. One of them to create a very soft shadow, and the other one is a little bit sharper, crisper shadow. So I'm going to turn on one of them and then the other one. And I'm going to show you the settings I use here, but to be able to see them better, I'm going to change the background color to a mid-gray value, something like that. So if I turn off the drop shadows, you can see exactly that one of them is a softer shadow, while the other one is a bit more sharper and closer to the lights. So the two together looks like this. Again, this is a personal preference. You can experiment with different settings, but if you want to use the same exact settings, here is one of the drop shadow, and then here is the other one. Both of them are set to multiply blend mode, like the default drop shadow option, and there's a couple of things that I vary, mainly the spread and the size. If you want to see these settings better, I have screenshots of them in the blog post version, for which the link is in the description below. Now, the good news is that we can reuse these settings on the shades. So all we have to do is to hold down the Alt or Option key and drag the effects onto the shades group. And you can see it came up there. The only thing we have to change there is the color. So going into outer glow, we can select a different color. Let's say something like that. So what I like to do is to first of all create a duplicate for both of these groups, and then take off the drop shadow from them. So just turn off the drop shadow from these duplicate groups and then merge them by using Command or Control E. So this is a raster layer right now, but just to keep at least the filter non-destructive, I'm going to turn it into a smart object. So convert to smart object and then go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. and probably use around this much blur. This looks quite nice. Let's just turn it on and off. That gives more presence to the light, or more atmosphere. Once again, before and after, quite a big difference. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know about our creative membership program. For a small monthly fee, you get access to over 200 hours of Adobe certified online training courses. Master all the tools and skills needed to become a professional graphic designer or illustrator. As a pro member, you will get mentoring from me and my team, access to webinars, student forum, and creative briefs to help you build an outstanding portfolio. Pro members can also download the project files for all of our YouTube tutorials. Sign up at yesimadesigner.com/memberships and start your free trial today. And now, let's head back to the tutorial. The next, I'm going to add another additional glow by using a shape layer, and I normally use the ellipse tool, but you can use a custom shape as well. I'm going to draw a circle somewhere here in the center where most of the neon lights are, and which part is the focal point of the whole composition. And I'm going to change it so it doesn't have any stroke value. It just simply has the same color as that blue light we used on the main neon lights. So that's the fill color. And it's a shape layer once again, completely non-destructive vector shape layer. The most important thing that I'm going to do now is to go into the properties panel, switch to the mask properties, and increase the feather value. With this, we can blur out this shape completely. Instead of blurring it with a filter, this is just much easier and again non-destructive. And if it's too big, we can always make it smaller. Let's just say something like that. We don't want the whole canvas to be lit by this. Somewhere around there it works. And then also we can reduce the opacity to a lower value, maybe around 60%. So let's just see if I turn this off, turn it on. It again adds a little bit more atmosphere. Now let's not forget about the different color neon lights on the shades. I'm going to use the brush tool. Already set this layer to overlay blend mode. We can of course change that later. And then use a soft brush, bigger brush. By the way, I'm using Control, Option, click and drag to change both size and hardness at the same time. I believe that's the same on Windows, but you might need to use the right click on the mouse to be able to access it with the same keyboard shortcuts. So with this, I can already start painting. But instead of using a darker color, I would like to use something similar to that bright color we had up there. And it might be a little bit overkill if you are using it with 100% opacity. So maybe just press 2 or 3 on the keyboard to reduce the opacity down to around 20, 30%. And then you can build up the effect yourself. So you can paint over the shades a couple of times until you are happy with the result. And let's just see without and with. So that's just again adds that extra interest and glow to the composition. And another very important little detail is that normally these neon light compositions, they look good on darker backgrounds, but instead of changing the color fill that we have here at the bottom, I prefer to add a vignette layer. This is again going to be a technique with the brush tool, very similar to what we've just done. I will name the layer vignette and then zoom out a bit, use an even bigger brush size. Probably the same opacity will work, but this time I'm going to use the same color as the background color and set the blend mode to multiply for the layer. Now I can start building up this shading around the edges. So simply paint over the edges, make sure that you go over the corner points the most. So the corners should be the darkest, and then keep the brush away from the center part of the composition as much as you can. Now this is really hard to judge how much you need to add. So what I recommend to do always is to keep turning the layer on and off just to see how much shading you added. Vignetting is a term also used in photography and paintings and art in general, and it's a useful technique to keep the interest in the center of your composition. And with a neon light composition like this, it also helps to establish that dark setting where the light really glows and creates this cool atmosphere. Now, although we are pretty much done with the composition, there's still a few cool things that we can do. For example, we can add some pattern for the hair and facial hair. For this, I'm going to create, first of all, a new shape. I'm using the line tool, and I'm going to draw a straight vertical line, something like that. Probably the stroke size can be reduced. And also I'm going to reduce the thickness of my lines, the path indicators, just so I can see what I'm doing. And once again, the color doesn't really matter. Then I'm going to duplicate this. So Alt, click and drag, duplicate once, twice, and once again. Now merge these layers, Command or Control E, and then again, duplicate, and so on and so forth. If you're not familiar with this technique, I've recently done another tutorial with an effect and animation on type. So you can watch that and I'll go a little bit more in detail on how I create these lines. But it's really simple. As you can see, I'm just duplicating and then merging the lines together. So then I can use the free transform tool, Command or Control T on all of them together, and then squash them in a little bit. Yes, something like that. And also I will make sure that having all of these parts selected, I will distribute them evenly with the distribute horizontal centers option. So now that we have that ready, we can use the free transform tool and maybe turn them into 45-degree angle or 30 degrees. Press enter and then position them somewhere where they will fill up the hair and the beard, so all the facial hair as well. I think that works in this position. Now we will add a mask on this layer. So click on the little Japanese flag here at the bottom. And by the way, if you hold down the Alt or Option key while clicking on this, it will automatically create a completely hidden layer. So it creates a black mask on which you can use the brush tool with white to reveal those details. So I'm just going to zoom a little bit closer and you can see exactly what's happening here. So I can paint over and reveal these details. Now at this point, it doesn't really look that good because first of all, the layer is on top of all of the other details in the composition, and that shouldn't be the case. It should actually be under the vignette and under everything else. But we should also change the color from white to something less intrusive. And since it's a vector shape layer, what we can do is to change our path selection tool to active layers. That way we can select only the parts within this layer. And once they are all selected, we can go into the stroke settings and select a different color, maybe something like this. Let's just click away so we can see it. And yeah, that looks already much better. Now we can jump back into our mask, select the mask icon here, and using the brush tool with a white color, I can paint over the details to reveal them where they're necessary. Now, once again, because we are working non-destructively, the cool thing about all of this is that we can always go back and make amends on any detail. So I'm just going to paint over the beard very quickly, and I'm not going to bother refining these details too much. I'm going to add a bit of detail on the eyebrows. I don't think much will be visible there, but I'm going to add a bit. Don't forget the mustache. We won't see much because there's a lot of glow going on here. But there you go. That looks quite good already. Now, as I said, if I wanted to make amends, I can always go back, select all of these lines. And for example, I can increase the thickness of them by increasing the stroke size. Just going to pump it up a bit so you can see the difference. There you go, once again, completely different look. Or if I don't like the angle, I can go back with the free transform tool and adjust the angle and so on and so forth. And there's still a lot of little details that we can add, like little holes for each of the endings of the neon lights. I already created this, so I can just turn it on for you. These are simply vector shapes added on each of the endpoints. So it feels like the neon lights are connected somehow to the wall. And then also I've just added as a decoration element some scribbles using the brush tool around the portrait. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I would love to see your work. So the illustration that you create inspired by these techniques. So if you are sharing them on any of the social media platforms, make sure you tag us with #YesI'mADesigner. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.